Welcome to Boarding Pass, the Voyage Mice podcast, where we explore the people, places, and practical details that help you travel informed and travel well. From international travel experiences and the practical realities of getting there to the questions travelers often forget to ask, consider this your invitation to discover more before you go. For our first episode, we're going to be listening in on a conversation with our founder, Danielle, and product intern, Demira, as they chat about Voyage Mice's use of AI, data privacy more broadly, and some of what Demira has been working on as our first ever intern. This is just the start of our conversations around AI and data privacy considerations for Voyage Mice. Now, let's get ready for departure.
Hello, thank you all for joining us. I am Danielle, founder of Voyage Mice, and I'm here with Demira, our product intern. And we just wanted to let you all in on some of what we've been discussing around AI, data privacy, travel insights via AI or with AI, and then Voyage Mice. Demira, thank you for joining. And then can you share a bit about yourself and how we got connected?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Demira. I'm a rising freshman at Johns Hopkins University, and I just graduated from the Windsor School in Boston. So, we got connected via the ILE, which is Windsor's independent learning experience, and every senior has to complete this as a graduation requirement. So, I kind of wanted to design and work with AI because I feel like AI is such a buzzword now, and everybody really uses it a lot, but I feel like not a lot of people know about the back end of AI, which is actually very interesting. So I feel like I wanted to write something not just theoretical, but also include the actual practice of AI into it. And this internship was the perfect way for me to do that.
Awesome, awesome. And it was a pleasure having you on board to really get us started on building out Voyage Mice's website and really kind of thinking about like the relationship between the insights, travel insights that we wanted to provide, and the ethical use of AI. So would love to hear a bit more about what your like initial thoughts were like around AI, what you kind of understood to be kind of the conversation, the pros and cons, like what the general sentiment around AI as you were thinking about your paper and your project, and kind of different assumptions that you might have had at that point that might have evolved or like evolved or not with the work that you did with your paper and with Voyage Mice.
Yeah, sure. I think I kind of approached this with not a lot of knowledge about how AI works. I've obviously worked with it, as many people have at this point, and I've mostly worked with LLMs, which are large language models like ChatGPT. But now I think AI has become very central to how travel companies or any agencies in many, many industries operate. And through this experience, I've really learned that we need to start working with AI instead of against it, even though there are so many different issues that come up with AI, such as hallucinations and biases. But if you have a human centered model and you're working with AI alongside a human advisor, I think there is a lot of good that can come out of it. Obviously, there's a lot of inherent issues with AI, but it's moving at such a quick rate that, such as agentic AI now is coming up, it's the next big thing. And I think that we do need to just figure out a way to work alongside it.
Mhm. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, because I think they're like as much as like as you mentioned, AI is here, it's moving quickly. And so there is of course a lot of resistance to that, embracing of that. And it's kind of like how do we navigate that with wanting to be like tech forward, wanting to progress, but also wanting to maybe even move a bit more cautiously and think about like the need to like address some of these hallucinations that you mentioned and biases at this kind of more foundational stage before it could even kind of like grow and get cause additional complications further down the line. So I think you and I have like yeah had some conversations about this a lot, and then I think we've spoken a bit too about the kind of hallucinations and what that means for how we can use AI and the level of kind of human oversight, as you mentioned, that it needs. And I think what plays into that as well is the that oversight, as well as being mindful about how the prompts are done too. So, yeah, particularly as I've been leveraging AI to build out the travel insights for Voyage Mice, I have kind of run into some instances where I see some of these hallucinations and biases coming out, and then it's like how to manage that and address that while also leveraging AI to help produce this type of research at scale. But I guess before we get even further into that piece, we probably should define for the audience what we mean by hallucinations, and we can start with that and then have a longer conversation about what that kind of means in terms of bias. But feel free to also define hallucinations for us and then discuss how bias connects with that.
Yeah, sure. So, an AI hallucination is essentially this output, and it sounds very confident and plausible, like it makes perfect sense within the context, but it's factually wrong, or the AI has like, entirely fabricated it. Um, and it's named that because the system's not trying to lie to you on purpose, but it's generating something that kind of pattern matches, which is the purpose of AI, to a real answer without it being grounded in any type of real information.
Mhm. Yeah, interesting. Yes, thank you for clarifying that for us. It's like the AI was responding to what it was trained on, how it was kind of trained to think. And so in in my kind of experience working with it outside of Voyage Mice and with Voyage Mice, it's been interesting to kind of learn more about what the underlying data the AI might have received, and then how it is then responding based on that initial model, as well as responding to the prompts that we and I have given it. And I think this comes up particularly for Voyage Mice in that the main premise of this company is to be global, to represent a diverse set of voices and experiences. But we've also been using a lot of AI tools that are built within the US. So then the question that I constantly am having and uh, kind of processing in different ways is like, what does that mean for the types of information that I'm getting, especially if we want to get global information for Voyage
Mhm.
Mice. So very early on in playing around with AI, like on my own as well as for Voyage Mice, I noticed that it was feeding me information that was primarily from US sources.
Yeah.
And so one hmm, early run-in example is when I wanted to understand I was looking into relocating potentially to French Guiana, wanted to understand what areas I might consider. Never been to French Guiana, don't know too much about it other than via my experience with French, but I still do speak fluent French. And so I saw the initial like brief that AI prepared for me, but then based on how it was written and the feedback kind of around like danger and safety, I sensed that it had more of a US or global West tilt and an English tilt to it. So then I asked the AI, I won't go into which one I use at this point, but I asked the AI if it only searched in English, and it said yes. So I mean, I'm assuming that is going to be truthful with me, but it said yes, and it said because that is where most of the information, that was the language in which most of the information was. And so that gave me like pause, and it was interesting because then as we kind of dig deeper into like general research methodology, like what is the foundation of the data that it's getting? And then, you mentioned, you recently graduated from Windsor. Uh, so we have that like with we have that Sean Foundation of Research methodology, right, as well,
Yeah.
and like that critical thinking. aspect piece, as I am also a graduate of Windsor. And so then, so with that AI focusing on the English piece in terms of volume, it was trying to give like an answer, trying to do what it was trained to do to process large amounts of research and get to a question efficiently. So then you could kind of argue that focusing on, or one could argue like focusing on like where the more volume, the most volume is, could give it the most amount of information and help it be efficient. But then at the expense of other language sources. So actually, when I pushed back on the AI and said, for me, it really needs to look across all the languages and particularly look in the primary languages of the region of focus and
Mhm.
then produce different results. And then it produced some content in original French, and then the translations were a bit different, and actually concerns about safety were not as prevalent. Um, and so that it's like, I mean, so that not really touching on like, the hallucination piece specifically, but definitely like on the bias piece, as well as like the level of human oversight that is needed in that kind
Yeah.
of, not necessarily expertise in the space that one's looking into, but kind of being mindful of other questions that need to be asked and kind of like treating AI more as like a tool and not like the kind of the end all be all there. Um, so now leaning more into where AI can be kind of biased and kind of what that means in terms of like how we use it, what that means in terms of policies around AI. Tell me a little bit more about your final project. Because one of the pieces was a paper that you wrote. So AI in the travel industry, balancing innovation, ethics, and human judgment. So I feel like this, touched on, some of the some biases, how to manage that, how to mitigate that, and then different entities globally, their responses to that. So like tell us more like about your paper and kind of how that kind of connection to bias there.
Yeah, definitely. So my research paper consisted of three sections. That's kind of how I structured it. And section one was mainly focused on the applications of AI. And I found a lot of different productivity effects and personalizations that AI could make. Obviously, there's a lot of reliability limits, as you mentioned before. And there are many privacy laws that governments are starting to come up with. The issue is mainly that technology moves at such a quick rate. AI is definitely moving at such a quick rate. So, how do governments keep up with that kind of progression? And I found that the strictest and most established frameworks that we have for AI are in the EU. So, we have the GDPR, and that really requires clear disclosure and consent and data access. Um, and we also have the CCPA and CPRA in California, if we want to look right here in the United States, because it grants state consumers rights over collection and use of personal data. It is one of the more stricter frameworks. And Canada has some, and there's Brazil, Japan, India. They're all trying to catch up to the different AIs that are coming out now and really trying to protect the data privacy of individuals. So that's something that I was studying and putting into my own paper. And I also wanted to make sure that I emphasized the human in the loop model.
Mhm.
So, as you were talking about how closely you had to work with the AI to make sure that the biases were not being actively represented in Voyage Mice, we want to make sure that the AI is producing your drafts or your research or recommendations, but then a human has to review and approve anything, especially if it's consequential before it reaches the client. And I was really looking at a lot of personal information that travel agencies typically collect and how dangerous that could be if like the AI has access to that, the kind of data privacy issues you would run into with that. So having a human at the center, at the core of this is really what's essential. And that was the kind of thesis of my paper.
All right, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then your paper is available on the voyagemice.com website, so people are able to take a look through and see the research that you did and the analysis, of course, as well. And wanted to like follow up in terms of follow up on that privacy data laws piece. So when you were like starting your project? Were you like already somewhat familiar with some of these data laws? So kind of what was your initial kind of understanding? And then um, kind of what maybe additional opinions you have like around that? Because like I'm also thinking in terms of there is this conversation within the tech space. There's this concept of moving fast and like breaking things. So then that kind of lends to the side of building the technology and then the policies will follow.
Mhm.
And so there is like this sense to that Europe and the GDPR are kind of trying to hit pause a bit on that and to um, like not be so far behind the technology. So there's pros and cons of that. So just curious to know like your like as I mentioned, just your initial understanding around privacy data laws initially, and then kind of some of your kind of evolving thoughts, additional questions like you might have, or just kind of where your thoughts are on that at the moment.
Yeah, I think initially I wasn't as familiar with all of the compliance regulations before. Um, but I think that we need to have these regulations built in from day one when designing a plan for building like an LLC or any kind of organization that's going to incorporate AI into it. Because it's really it should not be a compliance review, right? Bolted afterward. It should be this kind of design constraint from day one because it's going to minimize the amount of personal data that's collected. You're going to get informed consent up front, and it's going to require this kind of human sign off on AI outputs. And that's what's essential to it. And the main issue with governments coming in afterwards, after all of this data is already collected, is that it's kind of like too little too late at that point. And there's a lot of issues in the United States with how much privacy is really afforded to each consumer. I think a lot of people would be surprised by how much of their information is really out there, especially when you think about certain states, like in Massachusetts, in the House and in the Senate, they're coming up with this new data privacy bill regarding location and geolocation and how companies are able to actually keep that information for themselves right now. And you also have data brokers out there that are selling information about you to various people. So, yeah, there really needs to be a crackdown on the kinds of privacy laws that are out there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. And then Voyage Mice is definitely built to protect people's data privacy and respect global laws. And as much as like you and I both enjoy analytics, but then like definitely looking at it in an ethical and like legal way. So there's been time devoted to leveraging the research that you did as well to make sure that Voyage Mice has the legal policies in place that respect individual privacy, the privacy of the users that would be interacting with Voyage Mice, as well as respecting global laws. So, and that has been a journey for me in particular as well. So the focus on building out those legal policies was, or the foundation rather, was ensuring compliance with California mainly as one of the more stricter ones, as you mentioned, and then with this LLC being based in California, and then the GDPR as one of the more or most strict guidelines as well. And so throughout that process, that led to a significant revamp of the cookie banner. Because one thing that I found too is that on the US, you see a lot more of the option to just X out the cookie banner, but
Mhm.
that's not compliant for the GDPR, as well as it's required that users be able to click on the cookie preferences and then change their mind later.
Yeah.
And then another interesting area that Voyage Mice is still exploring as well is privacy data laws in China. And so that represents a different set of nuances, shall we say. And apart from the restrictions that China places on data sharing back and forth. So that's like a piece of that larger conversation, but a bit separate from the legal disclosures that are required to access, advertise, to engage with users there. So. Great. This has been a lovely conversation. Demira, are there any kind of final thoughts that you want to add?
I guess I'd just emphasize that with all of the more negative aspects of AI, there are also a lot of positives based on the research I was doing. Like I came up with a lot of numbers that show me that AI should be incorporated, just with all of the constraints that we have mentioned, like right now. So, for example, after AI adoption, there was this study, this Fernet study, that showed a 53.3% increase in daily bookings. So that's great. And you also have a 59.8% reduction in average response time. And you have a 17.8% increase in satisfaction scores. So there are a lot of benefits to AI, particularly with making sure that things are as efficient as possible on both ends for the user and for the company. But yeah, it just needs some more work. And as the technology becomes better, we can kind of reevaluate. That's kind of another thing I would say, that there has to be constant reevaluation as technology progresses, as AI progresses. And yeah, that's kind of what I would like to end on.
Awesome. Thank you for those final thoughts, and thank you for your time. Look forward to having future conversations with you, with others about this, as well as like anyone who's looking to engage via the comments or our social media channels. So thank you again. Look forward to chatting more.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Boarding Pass. We hope today's conversation has helped you learn more about Voyage Mice, how we use AI, and piqued your curiosity. To listen to more on this topic in international travel, be sure to follow Voyage Mice Boarding Pass wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow Voyage Mice across all of our social media channels for more international travel tips, insights, and inspiration. Until next time, travel informed, travel well, and we'll see you on the next Voyage Mice Boarding Pass.